this section on racism. And first thing to remind everybody, this perhaps for some of you may be seen to be a very controversial subject, something that you may have very strong feelings about, but I always approach this section with the idea of academics and scholarship and looking at particular voices. And I like to key on those actual voices that work in the supposed field of racism, especially fighting against racism. Now, racism is just one thread of all these various so-called isms. Yeah, so if you can really understand the components, yeah, what creates, what sustains, and expands ideas of so-called racism, then you start to understand much of the other isms like classism and sexism and so forth. Yeah, they really all work in the same way, and what you find is what's called the alibi. The prejudice may be different. So let's kind of start off by looking at reading from a book, I Write What I Like, the great Stephen Biko. I have a couple of clips in there. You can take a look at that. And Stephen Biko was a very important voice in the 1970s who fought up against South African apartheid. And from his book, I Write What I Like, he has a quote on black consciousness. And it's in here that he kind of extracts to me, a very important statement in regards to looking how we should look at racism. Some key words. So this is the whole part. I want you guys to remember these are some key words and concepts that are connecting all these various writers. A lot of time people talk about racism as if it's just an opinion, just someone's idea. And and I'm not saying opinions aren't important, but I think an educated opinion, especially looking at different ideas in philosophers or people who have talked or written about this subject, gives you a better understanding, right? So you study those who study. So again, it's always important to remember who these voices are, besides what they say. So anyway, Stephen Biko, as you can see in the film, he fought against apartheid in South Africa. He actually gave his life for the struggle. Unlike Mandela, who was jailed for many, many years, Biko was so dangerous. In fact, while in jail in custody, it's said that he killed himself, although the evidence is pretty strong that he was murdered while in jail. But anyways, look right in this section here. Those who know, right? The idea, of course, there are those who don't know. Define racism as discrimination. So I want you to stop at that word. What does discrimination mean? What are the verb to discriminate? In other words, there's a power to discriminate. Discrimination is a system of that power. Yeah, it's that systematic way in which you can discriminate by a group, one group, whatever that group might be, against another for the purposes of subjugation. There's another key word. There's a purpose behind it, which is to subjugate. Look up the meaning of the word subjugation, or maintaining subjugation. And I would actually add to that to expand subjugation. So some key ideas there: discrimination, one group for the purposes of subjugation. In other words, one cannot be racist unless he has the power to subjugate. That's a key element. You have to have the power to oppress, but to discriminate. If I don't have the power to subjugate or discriminate, it's not a system of racism. What blacks are doing is merely to respond to a situation in which they find themselves the objects of white racism. We are in the position in which we are because of our skin. We are collectively segregated against. Again, not talking about individuals now. We're talking about group. Again, he's not talking about individual ideas. See, people get caught up with the individual ideas and missing the whole idea of systematic group upon group. We are in a position in which we are because of our skin. We are collectively segregated against. Again, that's discriminated against. What can be more logical than for us to respond as a group? When workers come together under the auspices of a trade union to strive for the betterment of their conditions, nobody expresses surprise in the Western world. It is done nothing. It is the done thing. Nobody accuses them of separatist tendencies. Again, the idea that when you speak out against the discrimination, you speak out against the subjugation, right? This idea as if that becomes seen as racism by those who are in power, those who are doing the subjugation. So again, when you think about, as you notice, he did not really talk, not about skin color, a little bit about, the fact that they're black, but the idea is about, it's about subjugation and maintaining that subjugation. Yeah, these are keywords along with discrimination. Um, just to kind of tie in, another piece I put, and it's actually more tied in with Hawaii, very short piece. I'm not going to get too deep into that, by Rosa. And I want you guys to look at, especially in regards to Hawaii. He does, distinguish with some good vocabulary to understand there's a difference between ethnicity and what is constructed as become race. He talks a little bit about the situations in Hawaii, specifically, especially with Native Hawaiians and different ethnic groups. A little bit about the history. And then at the very end, he kind of comes with some ideas, which I find as being important, as he kind of gives how to rectify the situation. He talks about the main issues that have to be overcome. Yeah, and I'm not, again, like he says here, issue one, newcomers, usually white, but basically anyone expecting Hawaii to be like the continent of the United States, often initially feel uncomfortable, right? Someone that comes here and they face a different society, different rules, different social norms, different power structure, different ideas of discrimination. Again, remember in Hawaii, the so-called people of color are the majority here in Hawaii, and therefore, especially for newcomers who may come from the continent, United States, especially if they're white, are never really in that particular predicament. Yeah, so they become like everybody else. They're not the norm anymore. Anyway, so he does a good goal talking about it. He gives some goals and stuff, so make sure you take a look at that. This will also help you in your. And one of the things I want you to think about, two things, is that one is for you to think about these ideas of racism that we have in Hawaii. And two is like maybe something about your own personal history, your own personal experiences, something you heard, something you think about, and something you'll be writing about soon. Anyway, now probably for me the most important voice. I'm gonna go through this. Probably the most important piece that I use in the last 20 years in these courses, and I use this, again, not just for racism, but really to understand the various kinds of isms. But starting off with Albert Memmi. Yeah, Memmi, first of all, is an interesting person. He's from Algiers, but he's French. Yeah, so he's a French guy in Africa. He's also Jewish, right? So he has this interesting identity. In Europe, he's an oppressed, discriminated against because of his religion as a Jewish person. But in North Africa, because he's white, he's actually part of the oppressive class also. And he's also a foreigner in that land. So he has a very interesting take on understanding and studying so-called racism. And I think for me, this is, of all the readings and books that I've been using in the years, this is probably the most, the best in many ways, that I think gives clear ideas and concepts. So I want you guys to pay attention to the concepts he puts out there, how he describes racism. Those elements are key to understanding isms. But first of all, as he says in the back here, all of us, we are all tempted by racism. In other words, it's not a biological. We are all tempted by racism. Again, getting why be tempted. There in us is a soil prepared to receive and germinate its seeds. The minute we let our guard down, let down our guard. Yes, so it's something we always got to be vigilant about. This is a key. We risk behaving in a racist manner. I want you to think about it, especially with things that are going on today, in today's world. Yeah, especially in the United States, in the federal government, in Gaza and other parts of the world. We risk being in a racist manner each time we believe ourselves threatened. Think about that language of threatened. Think about the idea of, the bad hombres, as was said by, President Bush, the Mexicans, illegal immigrants coming from the outside, taking your jobs, bringing in drugs, and this kind of language, again, this idea of fearing the so-called other. Yeah, we believe ourselves threatened in our privileges. And what is privileges? Yeah, taking our jobs, affecting, the benefits from the government, perhaps. So people, they're taking our Social Security. Again, many of these facts are not factually true, but it's the idea, that they feel threatened. Being threatened is a key element, in fact, in racism. The idea that you're going to lose something. And a key word there is the word privilege. Now, I'm going to talk in another video about the brown-eyed, blue-eyed assignment that I put up earlier. And you constantly think about that film and the word privilege. A privilege. What is a privilege? What's being protected? In our well-being or in our security. Look at that idea, security. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I just got a lot of things to go through, but I just want to touch on some main concepts that he uses. Let me just beginning here. Yeah, emphatically maintain that the focus on biological difference. Yeah, the focus on biological difference, color. Yeah, yeah. For example, despite its shrillness, at least among our contemporaries, is not the essential aspect of racism. In other words, skin color is not the essential aspect. And this is the key language. It is rather merely a pretext or an alibi. Yeah. So whether it's your sexuality, whether it's your class, whether it's your gender, and what have you, that's not the key element. But that becomes a pretext for an alibi. In other words, that's the excuse. That becomes the excuse. Another thing is that I think important to say that racism has a function. Again, racism doesn't. There's a function. Yeah, it functions to do what? It is both the emblem and the rationalization, right? It gives you the reasoning for a system of social oppression, right? It creates this falseness. Why we gotta set up an apartheid system? Why they set up a Jim Crow South system? Why are you gonna create people have to have particular identities, maybe even sexuality, and so forth? Yeah, and connection, as he says here, yeah, a system of social oppression. Yeah, so again, we're not talking about people just calling each other names. Yeah, it's a system of oppression. One is subjugating and oppressing the other. And this last piece, should a definition of racism include reference to the systematicity of domination through the advantages it pervades? Yeah, so again, it's a systematicity of domination for advantages, right? Privileges. That's why it's maintained. That's the function of racism. Somebody is getting something based upon some kind of alibi. Yeah, the organic connection, racism and oppression, again, they go hand in hand. It's not like, that guy over there, like people with bald heads. Again, it's tied in the idea of what is the oppression against people with bald heads. Yeah, especially in regards to a group. Yeah, or connection. Racism is connected to oppression, right? In other words, think about discrimination. If one is not oppressing the other, there is no racism. Again, they go hand in hand. It's a system of oppression, social oppression. Racism subsumes and reviews all the elements of dominance and subjugation, aggression, and fear, injustice, and the defense of privilege. Again, the defense of privilege, why we should have and they don't. Yeah, something's wrong with those guys, right? Therefore, we should take what's theirs, or we can do and they can't. Yeah, there's these mythologies that are built in via those alibis. Yeah. Self-justifications, disparaging myths. Again, disparaging myths. Think about the language here going on today. And images of the dominated. And finally, the social deconstruction, the social destruction or social nullification of the victimized people for the benefit of the persecutors. In other words, it's not just about saying guys with bald heads are stupid, but there's a benefit from, there's a privilege from them. Yeah, I gain something from that particular mythology. Yeah, so again, we gotta be careful because today a lot of people what they attribute to be racism. Kaleko, he doesn't like guys with long hair. And he's not. Again, what is the system of oppression? What is the subjugation? What kind of privileges do I get from that? Yeah, in this, it's not just simply the prejudice. You see, again, that's the difference with prejudice. But racism brings this sense of exertion of power, the power to subjugate. Again, going back here. Another thing he talks about is a broad and narrow sense. I'm not going to get real deep in that, but he does a real good job basically saying that, in the narrow sense, right, of racism, race being very defined across, it is about biological differences. Yeah, it's really about difference biologically. You have people with bald head, you get long hair, you have biological. And in the what's called the broad sense, it goes out beside biology. I mean, it could be things like your class, sexuality, the language you speak, perhaps your religion, yeah, and so forth. And this becomes the alibi, yeah. That the other's traits all have a negative valuation. People with bald head are stupid. There's something negative attached to it. It's not saying, people with bald head are hard workers, therefore. No, because there's a privilege to benefit when I can subjugate and oppress systematically people with bald heads, right? if I had nice long hair, yeah, there's some kind of privilege that I gained from that. Yeah, and therefore that negativity against them does what? Well, this is what we also call othering. Right? If I call them evil and dirty, that must mean that I am good and clean. If they are lazy, I'm the hard worker. Yeah, so again, you see how we use language, right? They're the terrorists, I'm the freedom fighter. This is a way to give negative valuation, not to justify, right, why you should maintain those privileges. Yeah. And there's really a lot of stuff here. Now, the other piece I just wanted to talk about, that I think is important, is the idea she has here that racists are people who are afraid. They feel fear because they attack, and they attack because they feel fear. They are afraid of being attacked, or they are afraid because they believe themselves attacked and attack to rid themselves of the fear. So it builds, right? I attack because I fear them, and because I attack them more, I fear them, and it's just a constant cycle. So violence goes hand in hand with these ideas. Yeah, you're gonna attack those who are different, even violently. Yeah, because of some fear. Now you think about it, doesn't necessarily really violent. Think about, I mean, if you guys remember a few years ago, there was that woman who, that story about her walking her dog unleashed in this park with his birds. This, black man, African American man, approached her and say, hey, this is a place you have to, keep your dog's leash, right? She goes off. They called her a Karen, right? She goes off, calls the police, basically making it sound like this guy was attacking her. And again, the whole point is, even that idea, right, that she is the victim, she's afraid, she's being attacked, and that created a whole situation. And this becomes a common element that you realize that's a game that's played over and over, that justifies, because their fear that they have justifies the violence that may be even or unleashed upon those. Yeah. So again, fear feeds fear and aggression feeds more fear, and so forth. Yeah. And again, I don't have time to go through all of this, but this is really an important cornerstone for the work you'll be doing the rest of this week. So make sure you really understand, especially those kinds of words and languages and context that is put out by Memi. Yeah. Let me just kind of read a couple more here. Racism is a generalizing definition and valuation of differences, whether real or imaginary, biological or not, to the advantage, there's always an advantage, again, privilege, of one defining and deploying them, and to the detriment of one subjected to the act of the definition, right? People with bald heads are stupid, whatever that may bring, whose purpose is to then justify social or physical hostility and assault, aggression, right? So, again, like this kind of story I just gave you about that woman in the park. And I mean, I have all these here too, but unfortunately, I don't have time to go through all of them. And yet, while all racism is harmful through its hostility, the inverse is not true. Not all aggression is racist. That's the piece. Not all aggression is racist, right? In other words, if I am the subjugated, I am the oppressed, I am the one being hurt by my lashing out by my words, or even violence in defense, doesn't make it racism. So sometimes you hear people say, oh, that's reverse racism, the idea that those who are oppressed and subjugated are speaking out against it. And they come with this idea that, it's just tit for tat, it's just one side against the other. No. If one is gaining privilege over the other, and one is devalued under the other, that is probably main elements of racism. So when you talk about racism, these are the kinds of key elements, or classism, or sexism, and so forth, key elements you must look for. There's a motivation, and the motivation again has to do with privilege, right? Somebody is having something because of that system. Let me see here. There is privilege. Privilege. A person who is privileged yet wholly convinced of his or her rights to this privilege should feel no need to be racist. And again, I don't. And then again, the idea of the privilege in the mythology, right? They believe, right? I did this. I work hard. Obviously, the prejudice is that, maybe I get long hair, therefore, this is why I'm a good person. And so when the privilege is actually dismantled, to show, no, people with bald heads and people with long heads, there's no difference. They will fight tooth and nail to protect that alibi, to protect that prejudice, because that's what gives them any kind of sense of power for the privilege, right? And many times, even when you show them that their alibi or prejudice is not based upon anything real or true, they will fight to defend those ideas because it is because of that alibi that gives them the privilege, you see. Yeah. I mean, when you think about the United States, people say, the United States is the greatest country, and they'll just constantly, we get the best this. And then when you look at the facts, well, we know that's not true. Yeah, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to many different things, it's not necessarily America is at the top of the list in education and so forth. Yeah, but the mythology of that being, that's what's important to protect because somebody is benefiting from that. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So make sure you read Memmy. Like I said, it's a real lot of um, important ideas that come out of this. Anyway, not just to end by one of the words he kind of talks about. Again, these are all important words. He talks about racism. Heterophobia is one of the words he uses also. Ethnophobia, xenophobia, all terms that you might hear. And he kind of talks a little bit about them. So make sure you guys take care of Memmy. Yeah. And